Welcome to this mini lecture called What is Kriya Yoga? My name is Sayan Pascal. I am the founder of the Light Collective, which is an online yoga school. And if you're interested in doing more online work with us, we have the YouTube channel you can subscribe to below. It's all free. And we also run our online yoga school. So we've got online classes and yoga teacher trainings as well. So a lot of what I'm teaching here online, we go into a lot more depth with in our yoga teacher trainings. We've got a 200-hour and the Light Collective method, which is an advanced yoga teacher training. So let's get into the definition of Kriya Yoga. And if you're wanting to kind of have a visual while you do this lecture, there is also online a blog, which I'll be referring to, which is called Kriya Yoga and Kundalini Shakti. Kriya as a definition. So Kriya, the word itself, is what's called a gerundive. And when it comes to like the science of language, a gerundive is a noun that is also something to be done. So there's something that's happening. There's an action taking place. The word Kri also means to act. And Ya, there's a reference to the feminine or the expansive or the growth. So the root of this word, and this is when we're kind of breaking down the roots of a word, is an action that is feminine in nature, which is to be done, or an action that is the feminine, the Shakti nature of it suggests it's kind of somewhat expansive as well. Transformative. So basically it's a Shakti practice. Kriya is a practice of working with Shakti, or another term for Shakti is like power or creative force. So this is the kind of root terminology of the word Kriya. Now, if we kind of go back in time to the Vedic text, which is called the Bhagavad Gita, you can see a lot of references in the Gita that maybe while they're not using the term Kriya Yoga explicitly, is talking a lot about this yoga of action. So in one translation of the Bhagavad Gita by Laurie L. Patton, Krishna says to Arjuna, Arjuna, the one who begins to reign in the senses through the mind, and who without clinging begins the yoga of action through the active senses is unique. And when Krishna describes in this kind of Vedic text that there is this yoga of action, he's really trying to inspire Arjuna into taking a course of action, into doing something, and to kind of describe how when you come from a still central space of yoga, it's a state of consciousness that allows you to take action in the world. And it's a kind of action that is without clinging onto the fruits of your labor. So it's action without any karma. It's action that you do. I mean, if you're a Christian, it would be that kind of Good Samaritan where you give money but nobody knows about it to the poor. So you're not doing it for the accolades. You're not doing it for any kind of response. And the Bhagavad Gita talks a lot about consecrated action, this idea of moving through the world and being consecrated so that all of your actions don't have these sort of karmic responses. This is Kriya Yoga through the Bhagavad Gita. This isn't necessarily where Kriya Yoga really starts to flourish. In fact, it is really through the ancient Tantrik classical texts that we start to see the idea of Kriya Yoga really becoming solidified. So this active Shakti practice becomes something that is talked about in the texts all the time. So really, Kriya Yoga is a Tantric practice. One of my teachers, Christopher Tompkins, who is a Tantrik scholar at Berkeley, and he has done a lot of research into the Tantric manuals. He has kind of discovered what the practice of Kriya Yoga is. So the practice of action and working with Shakti is a practice called Uchara practice, where we work with breath retention, we work with specific counts, mantras, and focuses. So the layering that often happens in the tantric practice, there's a lot of things that you've kind of got to focus on. This is very tantric in nature. And he describes Kriya in this way. Kriya is the creative power that births the soul into the body. Kriya is the creative power that births the soul into the body. So the time of your birth, there's this moment where like there is this yoga of action and your soul is birthed into your body. This is a moment of Kriya Yoga. This is a moment of extreme power. And when we really want to kind of get in touch with our deep soul self, working with Kriya Yoga can activate this. It's a synonym for the term kundalini. We'll do another lecture on kundalini if you're interested in it. Kundalini means spiraling shape. It refers to the light of consciousness as it is reborn in the body as a descending power tapped through the ancient practice of Uchara. So this is kind of quite interesting, the way he is describing Kriya Yoga as being a power. So he's kind of drawing upon this Shakti as being power, and it is a very specific power which correlates or is a synonym for kundalini. So the two are really kind of meaning the same thing. One is the action of kundalini moving through your body, and kundalini is the energy itself, or maybe just the noun. So this gerundive nature of Kriya makes it kind of active in nature, like there's a process, and the process has a name. The process is called Uchara practice. So this is a very deep understanding of Kriya Yoga, and these specific tantric practices, for many reasons, have been, for the most part, for the last 1,000 years almost, completely lost to the texts that have been hidden or destroyed over time. But there are a small group of Sanskrit scholars who are working to translate these texts. We're at the birth, we're at the renaissance, we're at the kind of Kriya moment of awakening to an understanding of what the classical tantric practices were. And some of this information has kind of filtered down into Hatha Yoga and modern practices. So one teacher who described the work that he was doing as Kriya Yoga was Paramahansa Yogananda, whose book, The Autobiography of a Yogi, you may be aware of. He was a 20th century teacher who taught a version of Kriya Yoga that was pretty close to what the tantric texts that are now being revealed describe. So he was teaching a series of like kind of meditative techniques, working with mantras, working with breath retentions, working with focuses, working with the subtle energy body, working with the chakras, which was very similar to these ancient texts. And this kind of practice of Uchara, he was probably in the 20th century one of the teachers closest to doing this kind of work with. Now, in the 20th century, Kriya Yoga has also come to mean other things. And these final definitions I also want to describe for you. Look at me with my buttons, totally in the wrong spot. Classic cyan. One such teacher who used the word Kriya Yoga a lot was Yogi Bhajan in his trademark style of yoga called kundalini yoga. If you want to read more about him, I highly recommend an article which is in the blog post. It's called From Maharaj to Mahan Tantrik, The Construction of Yogi Bhajan's Kundalini Yoga by Philippe Deslippe. It sounds like a French name. It's a pretty interesting article on him and some of his techniques, and it can be good if you're going down the Yogi Bhajan path. Yogi Bhajan and the way he taught will describe a bit more in the Kundalini Yoga lecture, but Kriya has now also come to mean like a specific set of practices that layer movement, often breath, mantra, and focus in a repetitive way. So you might find yourself kind of twisting from left to right repetitively, or moving your arms in a certain way. And there's this kind of repetition focus that sometimes is more physical, sometimes is more internal. And these practices you could kind of see as being they're not the traditional uchara practice of the tantrikas, but this type of kriya, and we teach what's called like a Himalayan form of kundalini kriya. This type of kriya is sort of like a descendant of the original kriya, only in that there's this layering. We're working with mantra, we're working with breath, and sometimes these sort of exercises and practices can really, I guess, support the modern yogi who needs the movement on top of having these ancient tantric practices of uchara. So we also teach the ancient tantric practice of uchara at the Light Collective, but we only teach that as part of initiated sessions and within our more advanced teacher trainings. So this is another way that Kriya Yoga is understood in the modern context of yoga. And then there are two other definitions of Kriya which are important to kind of understand, because people can use a term like Kriya Yoga and it could mean any one of a number of things. So another way of perceiving Kriya within the Hatha tradition, so for Hatha yogis, is very often as kinds of cleansing techniques. So Hatha yogis are very interested in purifying and cleansing the body. So this is a big part of the yoga practice. Before you get into practice, you often have to do a lot of cleansing techniques that are both physical and energetic, and these can sometimes be called Kriya. And then lastly, in neo-tantric circles, so not classical tantric, but maybe if you kind of see a workshop, posted on Facebook or, I don't know, on your local New Age coffee shop community board, and they're saying they're tantrikas or we're doing a tantric workshop, it's probably a New Age or Neo-Tantra workshop rather than a classical tantric workshop. And in that community, the term Kriya describes an uncontrollable action that comes about when Kundalini is rising through the body, or when big amounts of energy are moving through your body, and there's sort of this physical movement or shaking that happens, or a kind of realignment of your body as energy starts to kind of work its way through your body. So these are some of the definitions of Kriya Yoga. I like to think that the classical tantric understanding of Kriya Yoga is probably the one that, we should keep coming back to, because these guys had spent many hundreds of years kind of creating these practices and definitions. But it's really good if you are somebody who's interested in tantric yoga or somebody who's doing these practices, to have a broad understanding of what this term means. If you're wanting to kind of read about it a little more, then feel free to head to our blog post linked below, Kriya Yoga and Kundalini Shakti. And we'll do another lecture within this short series on Kundalini, what is Kundalini and how is it understood in the West today and back in the ancient tantric times. Thank you.